why that decision is the right one.
Oh, I'm absolutely, that is my biggest pet peeve is people using feelings and that, oh, we should do this like it's a fact without any sort of data or facts behind why it is the most important thing. So yeah, I get you there. Um, Last one from anybody?
I hate that we're always sales driven or sales led rather than not product led, but there's data led, as you're all saying. I think this because sales drives revenue, that's what people see, the direct connection, and so they don't
Yeah.
see the direct connection to product.
Yep. Fair. There's some great ones there. We'll have a look at them afterwards as well and maybe have a chat about what we might be able to do with some of them.
Yeah.
Right. Your thoughts. I'm going to ask you this now. Write it down. I want the answers at the end. We're going to give you some time instead of putting you on the spot for this. Tell us the good, bad, or the ugly with the strategy that you sit in. What you like about the strategy that you might have for either business, the product, what you think, oh my God, why are we doing this? What are the things that could go either way? And we will come back to you at the end. So have a think about that. Basically, the good, the bad, and the ugly of the strategies in your current working world. Everybody got that? Right. Strategy. What, and I'm actually going to put this out to you. What does strategy mean to you as a set of people that work in the product world? Just shout out what sort of things does that mean to you? Because it probably means different things to different people depending on where you are.
Knowing where you are today and then the vision for the future, using the North Star and the mission to get where you are, using a set of like roadmaps, milestones, and then making sure that we adhere to the behavior that we actually want to exhibit.
I think one thing probably to add on is what we are not doing as well, where we want to be, and what we are not going to do. And
Yep.
that forms part of the strategy.
Yep. Excellent build.
Anybody starting else? Starting with why, like why we're doing this, and then the how and then the what. So that kind of like we've all seen the start with why, I'm sure, but having that and returning to that.
Yeah. No, I mean that's kind of we're talking about here, right? It's kind of where you have been so understanding that, let's say that problem statement, right? What you're trying to move from. Somebody said there, but like where you are right now and where you're trying to get to, and I think too many places work lose some of that. It comes up with something, and I've got a few slides later on this, but we just have some random bits and don't necessarily have a clear strategy about all of that going forward. So we want that. I don't like the word plan, but we want some sort of plan of attack from that. And what we're looking at today is how we, like I said, disseminate that down to actually make it usable and not be a set of words, right? Kyle, over to you to explain this one.
Yeah, brilliant. Yeah, and I think like the quote on the previous page is that idea, and I'm the same. I like that word plan. It gives me shivers up my spine. But I suppose what a strategy is not is, because my pet peeve is, when somebody shows me their roadmap and it's just a Gantt chart of a bunch of stuff that they're building that'll be delivered on several dates, right? That's not a plan. It's just things that you're building. A strategy is a number of long-term strategic goals or outcomes that we're trying to achieve under conditions of uncertainty. So the conditions are important because we have uncertainty. We can't linearly plan out, we're going to do this and this and this, because we don't know how things are going to unfold. So the reason why I like thinking about strategy is it pulls us out of the day to day and we get to sit back and think long term. And then you have to imagine what the future is going to be like. Whereas whenever I go into an organization, I find lots of the folks in there are working really hard, but they're generally like at the elephant like this. And because they're so close to the coal face, they can't actually tell what it is that they're working on. And very often their work, it either isn't linked at all to a long-term strategic outcome, or it is, but nobody's told them. And that really affects the decisions that they make on the ground, right? Whereas if you just do really simple things, which is set very clear long-term outcomes goals, and then just work really hard to explain them to the people doing the work, I mean, you'd be surprised the intelligence they can bring to bear when then making decisions. So what we're trying to do with strategy is We're trying to pull everybody away from the elephant so they can see it's an actual elephant. They can see how it all sticks together.
Yep. Cheers, Kyle. Right. This is another one of my pet peeves at the minute, right? That strategy in some of the places being just seems to be a set of the buzzwords of where they go next. And we had a laugh the other day putting this together, but at the minute it's all AI everywhere, right? That going back to somebody said before, starting with the why, it's not that. It's we're going to do this. So it was the same when RPA came along, or take your pick of anything else, data lakes. That was the strategy, not, well, why do we need that? Is AI even that, or should it be the foundations of data and governance first? What does that look like? And far too many times we see them written and it's just buzzword bingo, right? So it's how do we get away from that and put those foundations in place? And the other thing that is another peeve of mine is strategy that sits in a PowerPoint, right? We've had experience of this with some of our clients where they're like, we've got a strategy. Where is it? Well, it's in this deck somewhere over here. And you're like, right, so who's seen it? How do you bring that to life? Like Kyle said, how are you getting everybody to stand back and look at that in everything they do to make sure they know what it is? And then what we're talking about is like that shared language, right? You're talking the same language the entire way, that somebody refers to one thing here and a different thing there, yet it's the same thing, right? Common language helps us move towards common goals. Kyle talked there about everyday decisions, right? But one of the things we look to do is how do you take that strategy at top level and get it right down through that value stream across and down through your teams to make sure that if a user story comes in, you can go, should I be doing this based off where I'm trying to get to, or does it sit outside of that? Is my work predominantly not based off where we are strategically trying to go? But again, sitting on a PowerPoint because somebody thinks they've done it doesn't help do that. The next bit is the measures, right? Your metrics and measures that going back to the team and the decisions and the everyday and the language. Are you actually heading that right direction? Are you measuring the outcomes of that? Are you measuring the steps you're taking towards that to understand whether you are heading towards that North Star, like you said, Samantha, that we're trying to get there? We might not take the perfect path, and that's why I don't like the word plan, because it's like it's rigid. And we might take a winding road there, but we know that every decision we make is going, did we do it? Did we move the needle? If not, let's make a change for that. And then, like we say, across that value stream, right? That research, but what is the problem? The roadmaps, everybody's on it. That delivery and understand the outcomes, not the outputs, right? And again, far too many times we work with people, and it's, I mean, Kyle said it about that, but things like your roadmaps turn to a set of outputs that are basically just a project broken down into 3-month cycles, which is not really anything. What is the outcome you're driving for the business that's linked back to that strategy at the top level? Anybody have any questions on that so far? Please just shout out as well, because I can't see everybody. So when we talk about it, strategy for a lot of people is that one word, right? But it's actually not. And we talked at the start, what does it mean to you? But it is a number of things that bring that to life. And again, that's what we're talking about today, right? Where are you headed? What is that vision, that North Star, right? Dream big, like we want to move to here. And again, that's not discounting where you are now. Like we said, it's like you need to look and see what that gap is and try and understand where you're getting there. Kyle talked before about as I say, the plan, but objectives, right? Against outcomes and use of things like OKRs to measure actually how you're doing against trying to satisfy that outcome for your business. It starts to get that off the page. And again, you start to understand between objectives and the measure OKRs and the metrics. Are you making any progress? Yes or no? Or are you just busy? Busy being busy, not busy adding value towards your strategic direction of the business or the product. So the customers, and we talked about that at the start, right? Being sales led rather than being customer and value driven, right? Are you truly driving value? Or are you just doing what one person thinks, right? That hippo in the room. How do we get to the customers? How do we understand their pains and their gains and the use of things like the profiles, etc., and customer journey maps? I do love the ideas in this, right? Because the idea of having a strategy is we have an idea. I don't necessarily know how I'm going to get there. So breaking that down and understand what experiments I might need to do based off ideation to get to that final vision of where we're getting to for this stage, right? We want to understand, again, linking back to metrics and objectives. Am I moving that needle? And then the roadmap. it shouldn't be just a project plan in that, which I think far too many times is, and again they get packed out. But how do we allow some flexibility in that? How do we look at building that across many different things, from innovation to keeping the lights on to everything you need to keep a product moving in the world we work in, to try and look at various different customer segments and everything else, and still driving that value for your business and your customers at the end of that. And again, that word there, goals, right? Kyle mentioned the start, but you want a goal. Like, how do you know where you are with it? How do you get people around it if they don't know what they're trying to pull towards? Otherwise, it's going to be like a tug of war team sometimes, where you're pulling against each other and you're not actually going forward at all in any of this. Any questions? Anybody want to add?
Can I add a few
Samantha,
bits
you look
there,
like you're
Matt?
about to come off as well. Go on, Kyle.
Oh, Samantha, you go first. I'll go after.
Go on, Samantha. Ladies first. You're on mute. So if that's a good point. Right there. Yeah. You're still on mute. There. So close. Can we unmute you? See. Hold on. You're still on mute.
I'll go maybe while Samantha's figuring it out.
Kyle, you go on.
You're there now, Samantha. Go.
I think it's really important that when it comes to a strategy, we don't just do it just to pay lip service to the fact that we need a strategy. You've actually got to have almost like a marketing plan around it. It needs to be embedded. It's got to be useful. There's no point in creating a vision, mission, and going to that meeting where we all go, yay, it's so enthusiastic, and we create that thing and brilliant together, and then you put it on some tool somewhere and nobody ever looks at it again. When I was doing like product management in large corporates, I would just bang on about it all the time. Like every presentation I had, the strategy was at the start. I would use it in all my wording, my stories, my everything, because if not, what's the point in having it? Because we forget about it otherwise. And then people start then talking about it if you're talking about it. So we need to be the marketing of our own strategy.
It's certainly the marketing comms and being that leader, right, in all levels of the product organization, right? I'm doing something at the minute with visualization of the work, and I'm talking about that end vision. Like, I'm putting this in because I'm trying to get here to change your behavior, way of working. So every time I'm doing something, I'm educating people to why and where I'm trying to get to with it, not just I'm sitting putting boxes in for the sheer hell of it. It's like, no, everything here is trying to drive towards a better outcome here, use for this, use in terms of the bigger strategy of the value stream we work in. So I think that sort of messaging, communications, allowing people to bring challenges as well, right? Really have a go at it, but get it out of like a team meeting behind four walls and off a page and off a SharePoint, right? Kyle, you're about to.
No, I think it's a great point, Samantha. It's actually what I was going to hammer home as well, which is like, because there's obviously other things you could have in a strategy. You could have like a competitor analysis, a stakeholder map, you know, and when we work with people, we make them write out the long form strategy as well. So I get them to write, you know, clear writing gives poor thinking nowhere to hide. Get them to write out, why did you choose these set of objectives and why are they strategically relevant, right? Blah, blah, blah. But you're right. When strategy is done well, it's not that somebody writes a really beautiful strategy and everyone gets it. It's that you actually apply product thinking to the strategy. So basically, you've got to come back to the strategy really regularly. So once a month, once every 3 months, and you have to look and say, relative to the goals that we set, how are we tracking? And also, like, were they the right goals? And all the experiments that we ran, what did we learn from those experiments? And how is that change? Because if your strategy isn't changing, it's because you don't have any feedback. You're not measuring things, and we should almost treat the strategy like a product. You know, run experiments, take feedback, and adapt it the whole way. And really simple ones that you can communicate those messages so that people understand, yes, this is how my piece of work connects to the strategy. Because a lot of the time it won't at the start, and either maybe the piece of work isn't relevant or maybe you've set the wrong goals. And I think that's a really good point. It's the regularity with which the organization or the team revisits a strategy that'll determine whether or not it's a good strategy or a bad strategy, basically.
And it's something we do at this end, right? We've had a number of conversations about that, trying to challenge work out if it's right. And the guys have done a great job continuously trying to assess that, right? We talked about I say we call them assets, take your pick what you call them, but some of the ways of actually doing this, and what do those words look like, right? Everybody likes a vision, and this is ours at the top, right? We're trying to bring some of this to life for you. But what is that thing you're trying to get people around, first of all, right? That snappy thing that keeps you on that track. But then we talk about things like your OKRs, right?
Do you want to reshare your screen?
As it stopped.
You took it off when you saw that Samantha's mute.
Oh, that was odd. Give me 2 seconds. It was still
Okay.
sharing from mine, so give me a minute. There we
It
go.
might be me. It
Right.
might be me.
Can we see
Yeah.
it now? Perfect. Right, so like we say, OKRs and going through on that quarterly basis, right? What are you trying to achieve from that long-term goal? What are your key results from that, and where are you getting to with that, right? OKRs, I mean, Kyle, you'll probably back me up here, but we've seen some interesting attempts at OKRs that are kind of like, did we do it? Yes, no. Well, that's not the best form of trying to understand how you're getting on with that, your progress and everything else, right? And as I say, that quarterly impact, where you're trying to get to long term from that as well. What is that big objective that you're trying to break down to take small steps towards that every day? Like Carl said, based off the work that you're doing that you might not necessarily know if you don't have that guiding set of principles and objectives behind it. Metrics, and Caroline, I'm coming back to you on this, right? This is the bit for me, your metrics, your data and everything else, right? Understanding that I don't just feel like it's working. Is it truly working? And being critical of the situation we're in, going, yes, actually, we've hit where we want to be, and all these data points will say that, or no, we are completely off target. Like, what's wrong with this? How do we pivot? How do we move the needle, etc.? And this is one of my things, like that data-led evaluation of where you are. We talked about ideas and experiments, but test and learn cards, right? I'm not sure if everybody's seen these before, but they're a great way to structure your idea in what you believe to be true, but then test it like it will fail, and start to write that out so you know what the test is. And in some big organizations, you see people try to do some of this, and it's like, oh, well, I think it's right. Well, how do you know if you don't have the actual measure of it? What was the success of it? So getting these down, again, getting people behind them when it's in black and white to start and go, right, we said it was going to hit this or not. If it didn't, does it need to be pivoted, or do we need to cancel it and move on and do something different to that? So that helps, again, inform whether your strategy is heading in the right direction based off some maybe big hypothesis that you had. The customer value, right? Every strategy, you want to be looking at some sort of customer value in that, because let's face it, your customer's the one paying for your product, and hopefully investing again and again in that if you've got annual subscriptions and things like that, right? But what are your pains and gains? Again, moving away from buzzwords, but what are you trying to solve for that customer or that customer segment? What is their biggest problem they have, and is your product doing it? And does that build into the vision of where you're trying to go from a product or a company or a value stream, etc.? And then, like we said, that roadmap, right? We do quarterly roadmaps, because if anybody's worked in the sort of big projects before, you stick a plan out at the start of it, and 5 years later, it's like, oh yeah, we were probably nowhere near that because we didn't know enough. So how do we reprioritize on a quarterly basis with quarterly planning and things like that, and put a roadmap out that, again, is a visualization for everybody to be able to get behind and understand what you're trying to do in that quarter, and hopefully, like I say, start to, again, I'm going to use that word, plan, rather than react to what's going on in that world around you, based off where you're trying to get to with your vision and your strategy across that year, 3 years, take your pick, whatever it is. But again, incrementally step across, visualize and communicate what you're trying to do so people get behind it and you know you're moving that needle.
Matt, I'm just
anything to add there?
Yeah, just looking at the chat here, I think Samantha's raised a really good point. I was wondering, Samantha, could you share a little bit more about that? Because I think basically like the simpler a strategy, the better, and the canvases. But like that thing I said, clear writing gives poor thinking nowhere to hide. But I thought maybe you might share a bit more about that story, Samantha.
So I joined an organization where basically they'd just done a whole digital transformation, and everybody hated it. And the strategy was out there, and it was like everybody was like, it was a dirty word. It was literally kind of banned. So I had to create something else that was a product strategy. And what I worked with is with the teams to create product canvases, which is basically like a lighter version of a strategy. And you basically have like a table. And that was really, really useful because then we were able to combine it together. I think we used Miro in the end, and then it's got an AI tool in it. So then we were able to interrogate it and basically getting these things, but from that. So it was like a really good, why was a product strategy a bad word? Because we had, when I say we, it was before me, the technology teams had created this whole new product strategy, created the concept of products, and the business were not engaged from the start. And I've seen that happen at least twice beforehand, where people aren't brought along for the journey. So then it becomes a negative thing. So the teams were all slightly rearranged under the guise of this new product strategy. So everybody thought product strategies were bad because what was implemented was not a product strategy. It was just a big transformation.
Yeah. And the canvases are an interesting one. So I've thought about doing an actual session on canvases full stop, because you can go from lean canvas. The customer proposition, everything comes from two parts of the business model canvas. So we might do a full session on them to where to use them, which is purposely why we left out some of that at the minute. But I think you're right with that. I like the visualization of it because it's segmented into things that people can look at, and it's tied together across the canvas as well, which I really like. So yeah, we might do a full session on them at some point. Right. Guess the company vision statements. Anybody?
OpenAI.
IBM?
I was going to say Google.
No.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Next one.
Latisan or Confluence?
Facebook.
Facebook.
Yeah, or Instagram or something along those lines.
Meta. Yeah.
Meta. Yeah.
I used to work for this company, so
GSK.
yep.
Never have got that if you hadn't said that, Matt.
What about this one? IKEA randomly. And spread ideas was TED. Just thought I'd have a little fun with that. One of the things I actually want to talk about, though, away from vision and that strategy, is the levels of strategy. So each of you will be from a different viewpoint of this world, depending on what you've done in the past, from coming into the product world to leading it, right? But the idea is that, and we had a bit of fun with this graphic, but you have nested levels of this. So obviously at the top, you've got that company strategy down to things like your value stream. So the idea is, like I said, I'll take GSK. Somebody like GSK there is trying to collectively make people feel better across the board, right? But under each of them, they've got different therapeutic areas that each have their own strategy across their value stream, whether it's asthma or HIV drugs or cancer drugs, whatever it is. Each of them then have a sub level of strategy of how they are going to play to win in terms of actually achieving that. And that goes the same with any sort of digital product, right? Your company strategy is heading one way. If we take, I mean, I've got an example of Meta, I think, after this, but what they were trying to do from Facebook to what they're getting into now with everything from Instagram to what they're trying to do on a daily basis under those smaller value streams to then what the choices, like we say, they do in the product. So Instagram's got an example of just released something where it's a bit like Snapchat, that you can send pictures to everybody in your, I don't know, your primary contacts or something like that, right? But how that then links to the bigger value stream of engagement or whatever else it is, and trying to drive more revenue through that, to then the company strategy of maybe get more users, or let's say connecting more of the world. It's how you start to pivot that and boil them down for, again, where you are. And like Kyle was saying before, it's that elephant scenario, right? If you head off on a product by yourself with a product strategy, it's not tied to that value stream, whether that's in marketing and you're not going across the entire marketing end-to-end value stream, you're just looking at a CRM product, or it's not tied into the larger company strategy, you suddenly find yourself in a bit of a problem, or that section of the product world is not doing well, or you end up going down in terms of getting it actually collapsed into something a lot smaller, right? Kyle, anything to add to that in terms of levels of strategy?
Yeah, I mean, I suppose for all of us, like we'll be at different levels, right? So like wherever you find yourself, I think the important thing, and it was actually something Caroline said at the start, we just need to understand, if you're thinking about strategy, you're thinking about what are the outcomes that we want to achieve, and that's a very different type of thinking to then when you start thinking about how are we going to achieve those outcomes. So a lot of time we're working with teams, we're thinking, right, we're going to build this, we're going to do that, and that'll help us achieve the outcome, which is a way of thinking. But it's very important then to understand when we're thinking about strategy, whichever one of these levels we're at, we're no longer thinking about how are we going to achieve them. We're thinking about what are the outcomes that we need to try and achieve. And we have to almost decouple those two different types of thinking because they're very different. And then you've got to do the order thing in product, don't you? Once you've settled, okay, we're going to go after these outcomes, then you have to start thinking, right, now, how are we going to achieve them? You got to try and link it together. But I think just sometimes I've observed people get muddled and they're trying to think about strategy, but they're actually just talking about how they're going to try and achieve it as opposed to what are they trying to achieve.
Mm-hmm.
Any other points on that from anybody in the room?
No, I totally agree with this as an approach. It's kind of how we do it a little bit in HC1 because we see the business as our customer. So the company strategy doesn't really change. Our overall missions and goals are the same. Our value streams in terms of where the business is putting their attention and what's kind of taking the priority might change over time. And your product strategy is kind of like the upward arrow of how do you feed into those value streams and make sure that ultimately it meets the company strategy. And yeah, it's totally high level thinking before you get into the detail. And I think sometimes it can be really important to consider who you have in the room in those conversations, because some people will go into a lot of detail and will solutionize before you're really ready for that. So kind of considering who you have and making sure that you are getting that direction and breaking down any silos. But then obviously bringing people in early enough so that when they are doing the product strategy and they're making changes, they understand why they're making those decisions and why those things have been done. Yeah.
No, I agree. And I think I would add to that probably as well some power dynamics in companies, especially in value streams where you've got certain leaders and they're trying to do what's right for them, not necessarily collective value stream strategy. Absolutely. They just want to be seen to be doing the right thing. And then again, you're pulling against each other. And I've seen that in somebody I was talking to the other day, they were talking about that they're trying to roll out a platform, but somebody in a different part of value stream is trying to do exactly the same thing, despite the fact the other one's already there. You think, well, that is, you're just competing against yourselves there rather than trying to compete to win against the strategic direction your company, your value stream, your product are moving.
That's like the issue with silos, isn't it? And trying to get people to work cross-functionally so that you dissolve those kind of barriers.
And you find that then, again, if it's open, it's communicated, you've got the right people and you're having the right conversations, you're not just being busy for the sake of being busy. You can actually either pool the resources to get there faster if you can, or somebody goes and focuses on something else. But again, silos are probably one of the biggest things we come up against when we work with any customer. Strategies, right? We were having a chat about this and trying to come up with some of the examples where we've seen it. But I think one of them was the whole Meta rebrand, right? As a company, they were heading down the metaverse. They were going with wearables and VR. And I was doing some research on this. It cost them 80 billion. And they've come out and are kind of shelving that now. They shelved it in March, and then I think they turned around and said, oh, but they might keep a little bit of it open. And that was going to be their entire world, which, as I say, the rebrand was around that type of thing. And in the background, people were doing the whole AI bit and trying to weave it in. And that's become one of their biggest strategic drivers now, not something like trying to create VR and wearables, to the point that, as I say, they're going to really shut it down, or they might not shut it down, which I was reading all this yesterday as well, just to double check this and the facts, but there's still no clear direction of what they're doing with that part of the product. But again, the company and the value streams are all tied behind this, and then everything went separate ways. So it's not ideal in terms of being clear. And again, at a cost that was huge. Have they made the wrong decision? What was the feedback on it? What mechanisms were they used to go, and was this the right direction before you spend 80 billion and head down something that you shelve a few years later, right? And again, Strategize is one of them as well. I've worked with them, but their brand was around that business model canvas and driving that into businesses. And now they're pivoting their strategy on that to move to online, where you're doing it yourself, and you've got basically self-driven books and a platform and everything else to try and reduce overheads and everything. But that wasn't how they were doing at the start, right? That's a complete pivot based off direction from company, that then their product changed and their offerings based off that. So just a couple of examples there of how things can change across that, and whether it's right or wrong. As I say, I understand the Strategizer one because I can see where that came from, going through looking at outcomes and where they're trying to get to and everything else, and getting into more people's hands. But the Meta one, is say that's a big pivot for something that wasn't that many years in the past that they decided to do that. Anybody got any other ones, or Kyle?
There's a question in the chat, Matt, let's read out. So does the strategy help us to achieve the outcomes or maximize the capabilities delivered to output goals? I'm happy to have a stab at the answer if you want.
Go for it. I can't say it.
Yeah, so I think so the strategy helps us articulate clearly what the outcome should be, and then like any good strategy, it is all about execution. So it's, as we try to execute against those outcomes, we understand whether or not they are the right outcomes. So it's through that execution, through that feedback. And the other thing is, when you're laying out the outcomes in the strategy, we should understand, do we have the capability to try and achieve these outcomes or not? So it's certainly part of the conversation for sure. And sometimes you don't know, so it's only as you go to execute that it becomes obvious, as a company, we can't actually deliver the strategy because we don't have these capabilities. And then you can, again, refine the strategy, the feedback.
Yeah. Kyle, do you want to go through this one?
Yeah. So, so again, we spoke a lot about how the strategy is really trying to understand what are the outcomes we're trying to achieve. And we recognize that there's uncertainty, so it's long-term outcomes. We don't try and define exactly how we're going to get there. But then at the same time, it is really important that we try and help everybody in the organization understand how their work is connected to the strategy. So when I see a vision, I like a vision to sort of be like, motivating, inspiring, aspirational, long-term thinking, but also I like the vision where the team can look at it, and at a high level they can probably prioritize their work just by looking at the vision, right? So it should be have that kind of clarity in it. So basically they should be able to think, this big epic thing we're working on, will help us achieve the vision? If so, great. So that's kind of the vision. Then the next thing is, and visions can be, like, as I said, aspirational, long term. I like to think about the objectives as outcomes. So what is the change in business or user behavior we're looking for? And those outcomes are how we're trying to make that vision a little bit more concrete. So how we bring it down a level. So it's kind of concreting the vision. And then underneath that, then we need to come up with ideas, right? So if these are long-term goals, now you're starting to shift into the how might we try and achieve those goals. And at this point, you're really just coming up with ideas. You don't really know at the start anyway if the ideas or initiatives that you're thinking of are going to deliver the outcomes. The only way is basically by running experiments. You come up with some ideas, write them down, break them down, start delivering them. And then obviously those big ideas drift down into teams, get broken up into epics and user stories and so on. And it's a nice visual to try and understand how really ideally the team should understand, if we're working on this feature, they really should have a good sense of why they believe. They can be wrong, but they should have a good sense of why they believe this particular feature is going to help us achieve the objective, which will help us achieve the outcome, etc. And a good way to do this is, one thing we push the guys on is, can they articulate a key result that's going to be moved as a result of when they deliver this thing and they see the user behavior, therefore it'll move the key result. That's a good way of checking if the teams can link it up.
I really actually like this visualization, Carl. So it goes back to the elephant bit at the beginning. If you're looking at a brick and all you're putting in is bricks, you can't see what you're trying to build at the end of it. So having that sort of two-way feedback as well. You can see what you're trying to do. You can understand how many bricks you need, all of that sort of thing, right from location to the final use store. I think it's a really good. Yeah,
And do you know what?
I think how it's being laid out is really quite nice.
Do you know, I love it, Matt. I love it because it's that piece where, like, so we're all about trying to radically change the way people think and work, right?
Yeah.
And it's that piece where, obviously, like, if you're a product manager or senior product person, you can't be everywhere. And so it's a real good way of harvesting, like, everybody's brains. If you make this really clear for people, that people make different decisions. If they, as you say, Matt, if they can see the brick is forming part of a wall, they'll make different decisions, as opposed to if they don't know what they're looking at and it's just a brick, like, you know.
Yeah, and I've seen that even as recently as this week. I've been on calls this morning about basically the brick and putting a load of bricks in that really don't go anywhere, and you're kind of building a random wall out rather than the wall you need to build a house and everything else. So it's definitely there in the big companies. How do you know if your strategy is working? We've got some bits on there, but I want to hear from you. What ways have you seen to know that your strategy is actually working? So shout out, so I can't see.
People know what they're doing. If you haven't got a good strong strategy, or they're not following along, then what you get is, why are we doing this? And that big question is, well, that tells you don't understand it. So therefore, strategy isn't either working or they don't know what it is.
Do you know what's an interesting build on that is the fact that if you don't have the people that question it, they just build it anyway and have no idea whether they're right or wrong and don't question it on top of that. So I think it's the importance of having it out there, right? And
it's like the AI gold rush. Just do AI and it'll all be fine. Just,
AI's the answer.
You've got to work the other way around.
Yeah. Doesn't matter what the question is. AI's the answer. It's fine. Anybody else?
A good metric is if other people are talking about it. So you've done your bit and you've kind of talked about it, and actually other people are talking about it for you now. And you don't really have to circle back to the strategy because everybody in that group is already referencing it.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I like some of the things on the left, to be fair. It's like, when it's not working, we're going to end up with more meetings to just discuss that. I think you end up with some micromanaging from it. The larger backlog, because nobody's really saying no to anything, they're just delivering because it's in there. And you don't have that way of pushing back as a product manager based off your strategy, saying, no, we shouldn't be doing that. I mean, honestly, looking at features shipped, I'm sure you've all probably been there where you work with teams and all they care about is what they've churned out at the end of the month, rather than actually what outcome did we achieve, what did we say no to, what value did we add, how did we get towards that long-term strategy and vision.
Hopefully you'd see quicker pivots as well. So if you start building something and actually it doesn't work, or it's not going to go the way you thought or deliver the results needed, then hopefully people will be a lot quicker to say, actually, this isn't the right thing. We need to go back to the drawing board, because we'll have that confidence.
I think that
So,
I think that's brilliant. I think that's the nail for me as well, Caroline. It's like, because I think then you're being serious about, we've set the outcome, the thing that we want to achieve. And if you're doing that, they understand that the thing they chose, the idea, they recognize it's wrong because they're actually measuring it correctly. I think that's a really good sign that it's working. Yeah.
And I was just about to say that's part of your feedback mechanisms all through that entire process and the various assets we talked about. If you find something new and it challenges that, have the conversation. But I think all too often you probably see that strategy, like I say, is laid out on a page and never changes, and we don't take that feedback and actually question ourselves, or certainly at higher levels. When you get into the high levels of management, it's like, we're doing this because I've committed to it and I've got a budget for it. Well, yeah, that's why things get written off at the end, right? I know, because we had a chat at the start, we have only got a few minutes left, but tell me, chime up, what is the answers to the good, the bad and the ugly of your strategy? Or what you've experienced. And don't all shout at once.
I might start then. That's okay. Yeah. I only could think of something negative, unfortunately, but
that's fine.
Yeah, I remember when strategy was so disconnected from the product that was being delivered that basically we had to backdate the strategy. So yeah, that's So there was
I
no
like that one.
strategy.
Backdate the strategy. I'm going to keep that one in the locker room for something. Anybody else? Go
I
on,
think
don't be shy.
the key experience I've had was coming back to Kyle's earlier statement about you're having a strategy, but there are some unknowns, and your strategy has to be able to be bulletproof enough to navigate around those unknowns. So we had a strategy in January 2020, and then COVID came, and rather than doing what we could to achieve our strategy within the constraints of COVID, we threw away our strategy for a year and just said, like, everyone do what you want to keep us afloat. And it was just an insane long-term decision.
That is quite crazy, to be fair, Kevin.
Crazy.
Anybody else? Last one before we go on to the next slide and wrap up.
Sometimes I've been experiencing really ugly things when the strategy is too much focused on quality. And not because the quality is something bad, but you are just seeing how more and more targets and projects increasing because of the bad quality. So it's supposed that we are focused or our strategy is trying to create more and more problems to continue speaking more and more about quality, but not because the strategy is working well towards a good quality, because we have to be working and working to improve the quality.
Yeah, without doubt. Without doubt. Right. We're getting towards the end. We talked about feedback through this and we live by this, right? We would like your feedback on this session. We know we can't hit everything, like I said, with strategy. Hopefully we've covered enough to make it interesting for you and you take something away, or at least have the conversation and connect. But give us some feedback, because we are trying to do this, like we said last time, basically for you, for the community, right? That's what we want to do. We want to build the community. We want people to feel more confident about some of this, take away learnings to help them in the day jobs. Give that a click. I'll give it a couple of minutes. Drop some feedback in and we'll take that, and what we can do, we will. We'll let you know if there's anything we can't for some reason. But yeah, we've got plenty of these to go through the rest of the year, and God knows how long after that. So we will try and take your comments on board. So yeah, give that a snap, fill it in. I think it only takes a couple of minutes, Lauren. Probably not too long, right?
Yep, just a couple of questions.
Yep, nothing too big. And that is us. As always, we'll send this out. There's a whole set of things in the appendices for this, different bits and pieces that we've got for you there to try and help and share basically some of our learning with you, right? And some of the bits that the Ascend team have created over time. So feel free to have a look at them. If you've got any questions on them, drop us a line, right? We're here to help. We're here to try and help you in your day job, right? Let's say connect with each other as well, because that's what we're doing. And any questions before you disappear? Caroline, have you got a question? Because you are looking very happy there. We've done a sterling job where you're like, why on earth have I turned up here? So
no question. I think it was a really good session. I liked the brick kind of up to the North Star visual. I think that was a really good way to think about the parts, and an easy way to explain to other people who maybe aren't getting it. You're talking about the brick, we're talking about the star, kind of thing. So
it's hard.
Quite like that.
I mean, if you think even when they start a housing estate, right, we've had that first one, because like, where'd you put it based off what you're trying to achieve for an area or things like that, right? Like the amenities and everything else. And then say you've got the person actually putting the bricks down to try and get the people that. So I think it's a really good example of strategy towards right down to that user story level and how it all links together. Really like that. But anybody else for anything? So we are bang on time. Any questions? I've got a few minutes if you want to chat, pick a brain, want to get involved. Always look for people. Caroline, we need a conversation. So I want you into this as well. So
sure, no problem.
Anybody for anything else? No. In that case, you are free to leave. Go and enjoy. We'll have another one of these in probably 4 weeks' time, we've got an in-person meetup in Belfast next week. I will try and pop the plan of what we're trying to do this year onto the platform. I'm not going to send out an email. I'm going to encourage you to go on there and interact with all the stuff we keep posting and questions we keep asking and connect with people. So go and have a quick look. And yeah, get involved. And that is all.
Awesome.
Happy Tuesday. Go and enjoy.
Thanks, everyone.
Great session. Take
Have a good
care.
one.
Bye.